Hi, Nikki here, and today I'm going to give you some tools to manage some of the negative thinking and self-criticism so that you can develop a more positive mindset to overcome some of the challenges you're currently faced with. Studies show us that the mind has a negative bias. Out of the 60 to 70,000 thoughts we have a day, 80% of them tend to be negative. So if we work that out, that's on average about 50,000 thoughts a day. And that is every single person. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what kind of life you have. Every single person will tend to have their thoughts which tend to be negative. Now, there's a couple of reasons we have this going on, and one of them is called our natural defense system, and the other is our built-in protection mechanism against emotional attack. So our natural defense system, this is our reaction to perceived danger. So in our physical environment and our internal environment, our mind will activate our fight, flight, faint or freeze response, which is known as our stress response, to get us out of a dangerous situation if it perceives that we're under threat. So physically, this means we would literally physically mobilize ourselves to move away from a situation that our mind and our body is perceiving to be dangerous for us. Now, when we've got 50%, now when we have 80% of our thoughts being negative or self-critical, the mind interprets that as a threatening situation, and it will start to activate our stress response. The other thing that's happening within us is our built-in protection. So what we do in society, we have this need to be accepted. So every individual has this need to be accepted within society. And one of the things we do to allow us to feel accepted in society is we will put ourselves below the other person. So we will criticize ourselves so that the other person may feel more comfortable. And I'm sure you have probably done this, and this will probably sound familiar, where you might go up to a person and say, "Oh, I know you've told me 100 times, but you know, I'm so slow, it takes me so long to be able to learn something, or I feel so thick, you know, can you help me?" We'll talk to ourselves this way. So we will criticize ourselves or attack ourselves so that we have a sense of being accepted by this other person. Now, that adds to that 50,000 thoughts, those processes which are going on in our mind, which are contributing to this mass of negative thinking and this habit. It starts to become a habit, you know, when we start criticizing ourselves all the time. So it's really important to remember that, because if we think about 50,000 thoughts a day being negative or self-critical, you know, the opposite of that would only be maybe 15 to 20,000 thoughts a day, which will be positive and encouraging and uplifting for ourselves. So this is where we have to think about what feels familiar and unfamiliar. And if you think about going walking and you'd see an open field, you'd always notice that there's a path that everyone seems to walk on, right? And I've often thought about it. why has everyone just walked on that path? So you'll definitely see that there's a footpath. And how did that footpath become the entrenched path that everyone's taken? And it's habit. As soon as you go to an open field, you'll see a path and you immediately start walking down that path. You wouldn't just walk a different way. And that's really happening in our mind. You know, we have these 80% of our thoughts creating a pathway in our mind. So if you think of that field, that becomes the pathway. So every time we visit that place, we tend to walk down that trodden path because that's already been entrenched. So that becomes the familiar path for us. Our mind habitually has gone down that route, so we automatically will redirect all our thinking. And suddenly you listen to this recording and I am saying, well, actually we need to take another path. So it's important to know that to create a new pathway of thinking for ourselves, a more optimistic, a more positive, a more accepting, a more loving pathway for ourselves, it's going to take a little bit of practice. It's not something that just happens overnight. We don't just establish a new footpath on a field. And again, we are moving some of those 50,000 thoughts, which are always streaming down a negative way, into a positive way. So really important to be quite patient with yourself when you do the process, and to know that it's quite normal to resist, because the mind is it's so familiar for the mind to go down that pathway, so it becomes unfamiliar. So remembering that you are using a new pathway that's unfamiliar, and sometimes it takes a little while to learn and to establish that pathway. That's really essential in the process. And there's a thought that has always stayed with me for years and years. I remember reading this about 20 years ago, and her name is Louise Hay. She's my absolute guru, and she has a saying that says, "It's only a thought, and a thought can be changed." So when we think about the weight of 50,000 to 20,000 or 15,000 positive thoughts, sometimes it feels it's just too much to change that balance. And what she's really saying with that it's only a thought, and a thought can be changed. All thoughts can be changed. Everything can be redirected, as long as we remember that the point of power we have is right in this moment. We can't change the past. We can't change all the previous thoughts and the way we've thought about ourselves and some of the negative thinking that's got us to this point in life. We cannot change that. We need to leave that in the past. The future is still to come. What we can do is we can change how we feel and think about ourselves in this current moment. And that starts to change how we experience our future moments. So instead of taking the habitual 50,000 negative thoughts and critical thinking about ourselves into the future, we can start to change that dynamic. If we remember that our point of power is always now, this moment, we can change the way we feel and think about ourselves. We don't have to knee-jerk into a pathway that doesn't make us feel good, that's constantly activating our stress response and is directly impacting our health and well-being. So you can change that for yourself. And I'm going to give you a tool which I love using with my clients, and it is called Stop the Train. Okay, so stop the train and flip the switch. And what stop the train and flip the switch is, it's really about stopping those thoughts from going down that pathway. So if we think about our negative thoughts, you will notice that all negative thoughts or critical thinking about ourselves tends to be erratic, irrational, and it will escalate. So if you have a thought and you leave it, it will tend to grow and grow and grow, and you might find that it keeps pinging and it becomes hard to control. And the more it's left, the worse it can become. So I like to think about those thoughts as a speeding train. So hence the stop the train analogy. So our thoughts, if left alone, become a speeding train, and a speeding train that loses its brakes, if nothing is done to stop it, it can eventually derail. And when it derails, that affects us on a physical level and an emotional level. So the first thing for us to do to help us slow that train down or even stop that train is to start to develop an awareness of the thoughts that we are carrying in our internal environment. So this is how we are feeling and how we are thinking. So just like on the train, the conductor needs to become aware that the train has lost its brakes or it's speeding up or something is going wrong. You need to become your own internal conductor. Start becoming aware of some of the thoughts and notice them. Aha, there's a thought that is quite critical of myself, or there's a thought that is quite negative. Right, I've now noticed this thought. So you become your own conductor and help yourself to become more and more aware of these thoughts. The next thing is to just mentally ask yourself the question, is this thought real? So studies show us that a lot of the negative thinking will be irrational, erratic, and can escalate and become quite unmanageable. Okay? So asking yourself the question, is this real? You start to tackle the mind as it habitually goes down that pathway. You start to tackle the mind, and the mind will start to question, actually, is this real? Is this supportive? Is this really the most helpful route and the most supportive route for this individual right now? So is it real? Starts to put the brakes on that train, starts to slow the train down so it doesn't bullet down that pathway. Okay. Then what we do is we literally say, stop the train. Okay. So this erratic thinking, these irrational thoughts, they escalate and they ruminate. They go around and around and around. And as they do that, they collect more and more and more momentum. So it's important that we recognize, actually, this is a thought that's going on. It's not supportive for me right now. It's collecting a lot of information. So here's our 50,000 thoughts being collected every day. And it's important for you to say stop. So remember, your point of power is you. You have the ability to slow this train down by just recognizing that you are having a thought or a feeling about yourself that is not supportive and is not going to help you manage something that you are currently dealing with in life. The next thing is to recognize some days are better than others. Okay? You're not going to be able to wake up every single day and manage to stop your train every single day. Yeah? Some days are going to be great and you will be able to be aware immediately of the thoughts, recognize whether they are supportive or not for you, and say, right, stop. This is not supportive. I choose to stop this thinking right now, because my health and well-being is far more important than the pathway this thought is taking me. And other days, you won't feel that. Other days may be a little bit more difficult. And remember what I said earlier, we've got this familiar pathway versus the unfamiliar. So when you're finding that you're struggling on some days, it's okay. The mind is so used to going down a path. It just needs a little bit more redirection into the new pathway. And this is where I said earlier, being patient with yourself, being a little bit more self-compassionate is really important. You're changing a pattern of thinking for yourself that has been there for a really, really long time. Studies show us that a lot of these pathways of negative thinking and self-criticizing have been developed since early childhood. So if you think about, on average 50,000 thoughts a day since early childhood, and you kind of calculate that to whatever your age is right now, you're probably going to be hitting millions of thoughts. So if you're not having a great day and you're finding it difficult to redirect, please be patient, please be compassionate. Know that if you can just remind yourself that one phrase, it's only a thought and a thought can be changed. Okay? That's the one phrase you need to repeat constantly, and that'll help you slow that train down. So really important to kind of wake up every day and make that commitment to yourself to start thinking in a different way about yourself, start feeling differently about yourself. And if it doesn't feel fantastic, it's okay. It's a new day, you're going to try your best, and tomorrow is yet another new day, and you'll try your best tomorrow. Don't give up. If it doesn't feel good for today, don't give up. You've always got the opportunity to try tomorrow. And this is what a positive mindset is. A positive mindset is a mind that is constantly looking for an opportunity to overcome an obstacle. And it is a mind that has a belief that the obstacle can be overcome. And we just need to remind ourselves that the obstacles can be overcome, right? And the last little point to remember is that we all have our flaws. There's no one person in the world that is perfect. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is that we are all imperfectly perfect. And if we could just love ourselves and accept ourselves in our imperfections, we would be different people. So if when you become aware of some of the thoughts you're having, that speeding train, and you notice that they don't feel great, just remind yourself, is it supporting your well-being? You can change the way you feel about yourself. It may take a little bit of effort, but you can change it. So working at accepting that some of those thoughts are there, they're habits, but the more you apply to changing them, the more you can overcome them. And I'd like to leave you with a little reading. So, as I mentioned earlier, Louise Hay is one of my favorite authors. And in her book, Trust Life, from Louise Hay, there's a beautiful reading that I would like to leave you with. And the reading's title is, I am teachable, I can learn, I am willing to change. In the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. I now choose calmly and objectively to see my old patterns, and I'm willing to make changes. I am teachable. I can learn. I am willing to change. I choose to have fun doing this. I choose to react as though I have found a treasure when I discover something new to release. I see and feel myself changing moment by moment. Thoughts no longer have a power over me. I am the power in this world. I choose to be free. All is well in my world. And I would love you to re-listen, replay that, and listen to those words again. When we recognize that we can change the thoughts and they don't have the power over us anymore, we can really stop the train and flip the switch on our thinking. We can think of ourselves in a different way. We can develop that belief in ourselves and the situation, and we can create new pathways within our mind, within our thoughts, within our emotions, so that we can overcome the obstacles that life is throwing our way. I hope you enjoyed that.